Good morning. This is Jason Deed coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Saturday at about 8:19. Hope everyone's doing good. It is the weekend is here, so hope everyone has some fun plans and can enjoy the time off in the next couple days. Or for the folks who don't have to work on weekends. It's pretty cold out. Got really cold last night. Again, it is wintertime here in Mid Coast, Maine. But yeah, so today's show is going to be another specialty show. Well, not really a specialty show, but a specialty show in a way of my coverage of comedy and comedies. I'm I'm actually a huge fan of comedies. I don't comedies is the comedy genre itself. I It's something I don't. It's a genre, I guess you could say. It's a genre I don't really stay up on, like as far as newer comedies. I don't really, when I hear or am aware of a new comedy, I don't usually, go out of my way to seek it out. I have a whole you know, com like handful of movies and TV series in the comedy realm that I just absolutely love. I think I think humor is sexy. I almost feel like when a person has humor and they have a sense of where they don't take themselves that seriously. Like if you meet somebody and maybe you become lovers with that person, or you just become close friends, or just a close acquaintance. I think, for me at least, one of the attributes that I feel that really go a long way for a person or their personality is if the person doesn't take themselves all that seriously, and if they have a really good sense of humor. I think, first and foremost, I think that is incredibly sexy and very attractive in many ways. And I feel like if a person has that, along with other attributes, actually, and in all actuality, but those two traits I think are, for me, essential in a lot of ways, and it just shows me that that person is approachable, and I think is open to things and doesn't take themselves or life all that too seriously. Sometimes, very often things are handled the other way. And I think good comedies are, that really drive kind of that point home. Some of my favorite comedies, are just one of my favorite TV shows. I is Bob and or Mr. Show with Bob Odenkirk and David Cross. And I'm going to do a show on that series. It's a phenomenal series. I picked up the second season for the. It was on for a few years on HBO, and I picked up at Goodwill the second season. It was on. It was only on for a few years, but I have the entire collection, and I'm gonna do a big watching experience where I'm gonna watch all of the episodes, and I'm gonna do a show on uh, on that phenomenal show. So, but today's show is going to be on my probably my, if not my favorite, definitely one of my favorites. It's hard to say, it's hard to say when you want to pick your favorite kinds of shows, but Curb Your Enthusiasm, starring Larry David, the one and only. This is like, oh God, I love this series so much. It is a lot of the times with comedies, they're funny or they're kind of light. But as far as any actual comedies that really erupt, where you physically laugh, and it induces that feeling. It's kind of rare. You can enjoy things, you think it's entertaining and it's funny and it's silly, but generally, if when you see a comedy where you get, it gives you a physical reaction and you generally laugh, it's kind of rare. I think it's kind of rare, at least for me. I've a love for certain comedies that are more humorous, but they don't uh, elicit that, like, kind of physical reaction. This is one of those shows that does it, and I kind of feel my two favorite shows would be Mr. Show with Bob and David, or Curb Your Enthusiasm. Another show I really really love is Kids in a Hall. Those three series are probably my favorite, but Curb Your Enthusiasm is just. I'm a huge fan of Larry David. Larry David, of course, was the creator and writer for another iconic comedy series, Seinfeld, starring Jerry Seinfeld. That was a show, that I was kind of raised on. My parents were always into comedy as well. At least I've talked a lot about my mom's love for horror films, and she was probably the most integral part, the most influential person in my life to kind of introduce me to horror, and to make me a huge fan of that genre, and why it's probably why it's my favorite. And comedy was also a big part of it. I remember as a kid, we would always watch. We'd sit around at the dinner table or after dinner and watch Seinfeld. And again, it's an episodic show, but I think one of the most timeless comedy shows. I think it's one of the greatest comedy shows. And Larry David was the creator of that show and that series, and his imprint. Over the years, I have I've really gotten into his work, Larry David's work, and you see when you go back to watching those old shows. And of course, Seinfeld was on for many, many, many years. It was one of the biggest shows ever on to television, and you see his imprint, his DNA, his just how much of a kind of a misanthropic, cynical person that he is. You see his DNA all over that show. I mean, he wrote the show. It's just kind of a natural extension of his personality. Very neurotic. And I remember when it was announced that he was going to be doing his own series that was going to be called Kirby Enthusiasm, and it was basically him playing himself. And it was going to be it was picked up by HBO. HBO, one of the greatest networks, television networks out there. They were, now in this day and age that we live in, everything is about streaming, and there are, you have, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus. You have an endless list, or so many options to watch television shows. And with the whole kind of revolution with technology, the last 8 years or so, it's exploded. I remember when Netflix was kind of doing it by itself. They were the first company to, give the public the option to watch TV shows. And then they obviously had a huge impact and a lot of success. And then after about 10 years or so of Netflix being in existence, they moved into creating their own content, their own movies, their own television shows. And along that time period, after probably about 5 to 7 years of Netflix being in existence, they tapped into this audience, a massive audience. And suddenly that became a trend and it was an option. Technology was moving so fast. And then you had a plethora of all of these other companies that opened to act as competitors. And now all of those shows, all of those networks or companies are also, not only streaming movies, but they are also making all of these original productions, TV shows especially, and also movies. But HBO was doing it, kind of light years, before any of these companies existed. By probably 20 years. I mean, HBO is probably my favorite when it comes to kind of television companies or networks. HBO is definitely my favorite. I think they have the best, most consistent body of work. Just so many great shows, and they were definitely the company that. I mean, obviously HBO was it was strictly in a television format, and during back in the day when everybody had cable in their house, and they would have movies, and you would have many options. They would show all kinds of movies, lots of every month they would premiere a brand new film. It's interesting going back to that time and thinking about 20 years ago or more, and I remember HBO when I was a kid, and a movie was in circulation in a theater, and then 6 months or so after it went out of the theater, it was put on HBO, and you would, like, on a Saturday night, watch the premiere of that movie, and it was always cool. But right from the get go, they launched right into original productions, and I think that they definitely had the biggest and the best track record as far as quality. Examples like True Detective, they created that and backed that whole series. The first season, True Detective being my favorite series of all time. 6 Feet Under, another phenomenal show, which I bought a couple of years ago. I bought the entire series. I haven't watched it yet, but I used to love that show as a kid, and this is going back to when I was like in high school. So, and then also probably the biggest show that they had was The Sopranos. Another all original series, phenomenal, iconic, amazing. That's a show. That's a series I'm going to eventually do a talk on, or do a video on. So many great shows. And Curb Your Enthusiasm was yet another one of their shows, and it was released in 2000. And Curb Your Enthusiasm is basically, you know, Larry David, the character, but he's also just kind of playing himself. And the most, kind of miraculous thing about this series is that about 90% of the series and the dialogue and the situations, but mostly around the dialogue and the story or stories, is it's all like improvised. And they're kind of just winging it. There are certain guidelines that they're using, but they are also there is they do use scripts, but there's also a lot of ebb and flow. There's a lot of in the moment responses, lots of improvised moments in the show and in the series, and it's so spontaneous. And the thing that I love about it is it's not about like necessarily creating this alternate reality or a heightened reality. It's set in in everyday situations, situations that we find ourselves in as people every day, just a regular mundane existence. Whether we are going out to the local coffee shop to get coffee, or we're going out to get groceries, or we go over a friend's house for a dinner party. Just your regular, common, everyday kind of human experience. And this show, Kirby Enthusiasm, is basically that that aesthetic is in the spotlight, and just how life is just kind of silly and ridiculous. And Larry David's one of those characters that he's playing himself, but he just gets into all of these kind of messy situations with his friends, his coworkers, his wife, his family, and he seems to always get into this place of where, in one form or another, he's going to piss somebody off, and he doesn't really have a buffer on his like behavior or certain things he will say. He's really honest about how he feels, and he's also kind of by nature, Larry David's very, I think in real life and then also who he's playing on screen, which is he is playing himself. He's just like really neurotic. He's very cynical. He has this very dark sense of humor, and he's kind of unfiltered, and he's brutally honest about things. So, and he says, I think as a character, he says a lot of things, and in your everyday, in the context of your everyday life, that most people, are thinking these things, but they don't really dare. They do have that buffer. They don't dare to say those things to their friends or to their colleagues, or if they're out socially in a group, they're not going to say these things because they realize, this is going to set people off, or this is going to, you know, trigger somebody off to get offended or pissed off, or, you know, most people have, to a degree, have that sense of that. But Larry David's character doesn't really have that, and he's just brutally honest. So he finds himself in all of these situations of where he's always kind of letting the cat out of the bag, and he's just so honest that, and everybody, he just always manages to piss somebody off, and he's like the king of putting himself in these like incredibly awkward situations, and it's so goddamn funny, and it's just, the thing that's so, and again, it's like the thing that's so great about the show is it's what we all go through every day, and we all have that experience of where we might in the back of our minds want to say something or bring a certain situation up to a friend, we can see that they have an opinion about something, and maybe your own opinion is, to a degree, grossly at odds with their opinion. But we, are thinking and wanting to say something, but we might not because we are conscious that we might offend that person. But with Larry David's characters, with his character, there is no buffer, and that's the thing that's so awesome. He's kind of saying what everybody wants to say, and what everybody is thinking. Whether you're having an interaction with your girlfriend or your wife, or, and he's also, I feel like he gets in trouble a lot as a character because he has a high level of sincerity. Like if he's enthusiastic about doing something, hence the name Kirby Enthusiasm, he'll just say yes. He won't like think about if there's going to be any fallout necessarily, if it will lead to somebody's feelings kind of getting hurt. He has this kind of innocence about him. So a lot of the times in these social situations, he'll just say yes, or he'll just throw himself in the situation, not thinking of, what his wife might say, or what his business partner will say, and then that often gets him into a world of shit, and it's super funny. The again, the magic of the show, I think, is around the actual format, the way the show is created, where so much of what you're seeing is kind of improvised. So it's just so real, and it's brutally honest, and just so hilarious. And again, the best thing about it is it's just, everything that we experience in our regular, everyday, mundane existence. You're seeing that brought to life. And the cast, the cast is, aside from Larry David just being incredible, the cast for the show is just, one of the greatest, I think, casts for a television show that's ever been assembled for in history. Of course, Larry David, Jeff Garlin, so funny, amazing. Cheryl Hines, Susie Essman, and Richard Lewis. Richard Lewis is a great comedian in his own right, and he essentially plays himself in this series, and he is so funny. I mean, I think it's the best thing that Richard Lewis has ever done. Uh, Julie Louise Dreyfus is also in some of these episodes. Of course, Ted Danson. He's one of my favorite characters on on the show. And again, I bought this awesome DVD collection. It's the entire first season of Kirby Enthusiasm. It was on. There's a whole bunch of seasons too. There's 11 seasons of the show, and it's amazing, like how, again, it's so. I feel every time I watch one of these episodes, every time I've seen this show, I used to watch it again. I used to watch it. I remember when it came out, it was on HBO, and my parents used to love. They love. I mean, of course, they love Seinfeld, and they were huge fans of Kirby Enthusiasm, and it's one of their favorite shows. And I remember when I first came across it, my first time seeing Kirby Enthusiasm was at their house, and I remember watching it on HBO all the time whenever I would go over there for dinner or whatnot, and it was such a good time. And it's hard to believe that came out in 2000, so 23 years ago. There's 11 seasons for the series, and just phenomenal. And I think there's talk of him doing another series also. He's been involved. Larry David's been involved. I think he's one of the most talented figures in entertainment, and I love whenever you see him interviewed. He is so himself, and it's so hilarious, and he's just so great. There's a one of my favorite SNL Saturday Night Live shows was when Larry David was the host, and it's fucking hilarious. I mean, I think it's one of my favorite SNL episodes that I definitely recommend anybody out there to see it. But I bought this box set. This is well, not a box set, but this is the first season, the first complete season of Curb Your Enthusiasm. I bought this probably about 6 or 7 years ago. I bought this at Goodwill, and I've watched this a shit ton of times. I love this series so much, and I'm kind of feeling the urge to watch it again. And there's about like 11 episodes on this collection, in this collection, and it's so awesome, and um, it's so hilarious, and I never get tired of it. And I can watch. This is a series too where I can just like put it on and basically watch it right through. I got this at Goodwill, super cheap. Really, a really awesome find. Goodwill, I've always talked about a lot in these and in a lot of these videos. That's my. If I'm not at Bull Moose Music, where I'm buying primarily like newer movies, or I should say new unused versions of films, Goodwill is like my go-to place. That's like kind of my second favorite place to go to buy movies. They always have just an amazing selection. I was just there the think, yeah, it was last weekend. I went there last Sunday, and I picked up a bunch of movies. And this was, and it's always, I always go to the Rockland Goodwill, and I got this there. Phenomenal place. It's funny, I was just talking to somebody about the Rockland Goodwill and how just amazing it is. And they were like, yeah, it's the best one. The one in Belfast is okay. I've gotten some good things there, but the one in Rockland's really, really good. So, um, and I remember when I first bought this, my girlfriend at the time, her and her daughter were really, really into Seinfeld, and we used to watch. Seinfeld was her daughter. Her daughter used to watch Seinfeld religiously, and her daughter was in high school at the time, and so, and I have a deep love for that show, and we would always watch that, and my girlfriend had heard. I think she had seen a few of these episodes, but wasn't that familiar with it. And then her daughter had never had never heard of it. So, and I remember telling him, if you like Seinfeld, you would probably really love Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's a little bit of a different tone because the TV show is of a different rating, so there's a lot more. It's a little dirtier than Seinfeld. Obviously, there's lots of cursing and so there's no television censors. But other than that, it's the same kind of thing. And if you really love Seinfeld, you're probably gonna fall in love with Curb Your Enthusiasm. And I remember after I bought this, we started watching this, the three of us, and they fell in love with the show, and they were just like, "This is like one of the greatest shows ever." And it was, again, a continuation of that same kind of aesthetic that Seinfeld was. So it was very cool. We used to watch it and laugh our asses off all the time. And yeah, it's just so great. It's so damn good. One of the best, if not the best, comedy series ever. I highly recommend it if you have never seen any of these series. Especially, they're all really great. All the seasons are awesome. There's the last 3 or 4 seasons I have not seen. I mean, there's a lot. There's 11, but I've seen all of the earlier ones, and this is my favorite. They're all really, really good, but the first season, there's something special about it. I had a really funny experience where I had a real life Larry David experience, and I always think it's a super funny kind of story. Larry David, and he's highly intelligent, he's an incredibly creative figure in Hollywood and in the entertainment business. But he's from New York. I think he lives in L.A. now. He has lived in L.A., but he's from New York. He and he is, he's just incredibly neurotic, and his character, the way he is, like his personality, always reminded me of a character you would see in a Woody Allen movie. And but he's like, kind of misanthropic, really cynical, and and just super neurotic. And I remember a band that I used to play in, and this was going back quite a few years ago. A band that I used to play in, we were at one point towards the end of my time in that band, the last couple of years, we were, for a long time we were playing lots of like local gigs, and playing it in the local circuit area, and we kind of got a pretty good thing going where we were in these venues, and we were put into like the rotation of a lot of different venues. So we would have these like monthly gigs in all of these, different areas, like a lot in Rockland and Bangor and a couple of different other spots. But we got put into a rotation, so we were at these clubs, once or twice a month, just regularly. And it was really cool because it was nice because at one point we had a lot of work and a lot of gigs, and it would be strong enough or great enough that we could sustain it and make money right through the winter. So it was always cool for us to be, we were really active all the time, and it was always, it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. But the last couple of years of that stint, we decided to, because we were playing just in this local area, we were like, well, in order to kind of reach an audience and to kind of build something, we probably need to start, venturing out and playing in other states. So we ended up booking a couple of little tours, little mini tours of where we started playing gigs in like Connecticut and Vermont, and then we started playing gigs in New York City, and we were starting to travel further. And one of the first trips that we had, we played down in New York a handful of times in New York City, and one of the first times that we went down to New York, we had this at one point too. The band had a van. We all chipped in, had this. We had a pool of money, a band fund, and we would like use it for equipment. And then eventually, over time, we accumulated a lot of money for us to purchase a van. So we had this van that we would use to travel, and we would all squeeze inside the van and drive around and stuff and go to the gigs and keep all of our equipment. And it was cool. It was we all individually saved a lot of money because we didn't have to drive and spend the gas, because that band was, even with gigs that we had in Maine, we were traveling kind of all over the state. We would play all over the state, so it was a lot of driving. So that saved a lot of cost. But one of our first times in New York, I remember it's like it was yesterday. We were in Midtown Manhattan, and we were on our way to a gig, and we had a few gigs in New York at the time, and we had like one travel day to get down there, and then we had a gig that night, and then a couple other gigs, and then we had one day off. And I remember when we first got to New York, and it was like in the afternoon. We pulled up. We were at the stoplight, and it was right in Midtown Manhattan. And I remember we looked over, and Larry David was in his car. He was right next to us, and I remember all the guys in the band were all like big Larry David fans. They loved the Curb Your Enthusiasm and Seinfeld, and they were really huge fans of him. And I think it was me. I think it was at first it was me. I like looked over, and I was just like, what? No shit. Holy shit, that's Larry David's right there. And I remember turning to everybody in the band in the van, and I'm like, hey guys, look, it's Larry David. And he was literally like pulled up right next to us. And then we all looked over, and we're like, holy shit, it's Larry David. And he was in his car by himself, and he had like a coffee. He was drinking coffee, and we were sitting at the stoplight, and he was picking his nose, like totally digging into his nose and picking his nose. And we were just sitting there watching and just being like, this is amazing. Like, this is like a wonderful like New York moment. And and we're seeing Larry David in his natural habitat, and it was so awesome. And we fucking laughed our asses off after that whole experience, or during this experience. And it was one of the funniest experiences I ever had. So check it out. It's one of the greatest shows ever. Larry David's a genius. So thanks again. This is Jason Dean, and we will see you next time. Peace.